Welcome back. Last episode we stocked up a lot of goodies. Today it is time to use those things. So, without losing time, we pack things up and move to our new base. And since this place is just a desert land of grass, we shall first start making a proper industry building. From the foundation to the ceiling. That looks good, but we are probably going to need a second floor. So we shall make some stairs that will lead to it. Now, everything looks nice, but we forgot that we are still using the night vision from our helmet. It would probably be better to have some lights to lit up the structure. And with that, our structure is done. Now we can go retrieve the first components that shall be used to fill it. And we move to the future power room, where we place our battery buffer. With also our first battery, a Lapotron crystal. Then we attach the main cables, 16-gauge aluminium. That will store power, but to produce it, we are going to use a nuclear reactor in the next room. Then, we quickly connect the power cables. Before fueling the reactor, we also want some control circuits to keep its temperature in check. We also want the circuitry to regulate the reactor based on the charge in our battery buffer, which we can easily do with a detector cover. Once everything is setted up, we can start loading the reactor. We are using a weird layout that makes about as much as our old solar roof. The thing is that right now we have only one battery. We could make more crystals, but we will need something else for the later tiers. And a cheap way of making batteries is with sunarium. To make it, we have to run some glowstone inside the reactor. However, running it like that will take a lot of time. To speed up the process, we can keep the reactor core at a higher temperature. So, we tweak the thermal protection and remove a couple of vents. But what actually matters is not the relative but the absolute temperature. To increase that, we can fill the reactor with heat capacity platings. We can check how much heat our reactor can take with the tricorder. And we can set the protection at the equivalent of just below 70% of the maximum heat. That's about the point where things would start going bad. Just don't let the smoke scare you. Everything is under control. And once we reach a good temperature, we can finally breed sunarium rods quite fast. But managing those manually is an hassle. So we automate the cell exchange process using Ender-IO conduits. Now we can just sit and watch our reactor do sunarium on its own. But this is still inside some radioactive rods. To actually get the dusts, we have to use one of the thermal centrifuges in our old base. To finish off, we place it inside a battery to make cheap energy storage. And with that, we can also increase the charge level in our battery buffer. By the way, to fuel our burning reactor, we are using a mineral from the moon, monazite. From a single ore, we get half a stack of crushed material, which turns into about 2 thorium rods and enough helium for a lot of glowstone rods. Meanwhile, we sift the thorium from the nether to get some radium. Then we leave that inside a leaded box for about 1.5 hours, so that it decays. We can extract the leftover radon. And the reason why we want to make some radon is because it is needed for making the next tier of sensors and emitters. Going back to our power room, it is now time to bring this energy to our new base. So we draw a long strip of 16x aluminium cables that will act as main energy line. And the first thing we shall supply with energy is our new clean room. This time, to quickly get inside without opening the door, we are going to use Ender-IO anchors. And to not have to make too many thick wires, we limit the power using 4 amps cable diodes, which also help pass the power through the cleanroom walls. But before we start laying down the machinery, we should probably move to the thing that everyone is awaiting, AE2. For the beginning of our factory, we shall have 2 small controllers, one for the main network and one for the peer-to-peer network. Those are placeholder bricks, so we shall start building the real things in the corners. The main network is going to be interfaced only with the peer-to-peer tunnels, and we start doing so from the beginning. And before doing anything else, we should probably go get some energy for our network. We shall feed it into the peer-to-peer network that will be all over the place. And to avoid cable power loss, we place the energy acceptor at the start of our power line. Now we have turned on the secondary network, but the main one isn't receiving power yet. We have to add a quartz fiber connection to pass power between the two networks. And now we are ready to finally take our first peer-to-peer tunnel somewhere. We shall bring that one where we will have our main terminals, in the to-be main room of our base. We keep the tunnel with the ugly big wire below and come above with the smaller wire. Using the visualization tool, we can see the blue small cables, the yellow big cables and the purple P2P links. Next we can start attaching the first terminals and drives. We fit some cells in the drives and we are ready to start putting everything inside our new AE2 system. Now we can easily start crafting more parts with the help of NEI. Which brings us to our second peer-to-peer destination, the new machine line. Just for the shake of it, our first automated machine shall be a furnace. We use an interface to interface with it, but we must remember to set the output direction with a wrench and to allow inputs form the output side with a screwdriver. To use Autocrafting, we shall add a crafting storage to our system. Then, with the pattern terminal and NEI, we encode a new crafting pattern, which we place inside the interface. Now we can start asking AE2 to craft stuff for us. Once the order is started, we can turn our back and see that the furnace isn't working, and that's because we forgot to connect it to the power cable. Now that it works, we can go and check AE2 to see that nothing is being done. And that was because we must also allow the automatic output. And with that, finally, we can do one more test run to see that our Autocrafting finally works. This went well, but what we really want to automate is our circuit production. Since the room walls can't be broken, we need to bring E2 inside using a wireless connector. We place a connector inside the room, and a second connector below it. We get a peer-to-peer tunnel close to the outside connector to get a connection to the main network. Finally, we use a wireless setup kit to connect the two connectors. We want to keep the two connectors as close as possible to reduce the passive power consumption. And now we can configure the circuit assembler craftings. And with that, we can finally start our first multi-step crafting order. But we quickly run into a lack of sub-materials, which means that we are going to need a lot more of automation. Fitting all those machines in there will be impossible, and we also want to keep the machines in this space for personal usage. So we moved the AE2 machines to a new building. And to avoid confusion and walking time, we can rename the interfaces to have more fitting names. And with that, we can start filling patterns by using the interface terminal. Also, for crafting tables recipes, we are making a molecular assembler grid on the AE2 floor. Next we shall have bending machines for the most commonly used circuits and also extruders with the most needed shapes. And if you wonder where the wire mills, bendings for single-layered plates and the rod extruders are, well, we have an array of those. And we can quickly expand it using the conduit probe. And with that, there is only one main issue left, managing craftings that require fluids. The main issue is that to do a nice job with those we need a fluid pattern encoder, but that requires an alloy that has to be smelted in a TPV grade EBF. TPV is an alloy which contains a lot of platinum, and our only way of acquiring it at the moment is with a really bad ration in an EBF. To extract platinum with a proper yield we need some acids. Thus we made a room for the temporary processing of those. Here we have a small setup that makes the basic gases. Then, we make every needed chemical compound inside a single large chemical reactor. We can feed every gas inside a single quadruple input hatch. Then, by locking every fluid output and enabling the void safe mode, there is no risk of wrong chemical reactions. And all that machinery is starting to use quite some power. To avoid running out of energy, we added a second reactor with the layout more optimized for easy passive power. Next, we collect as much platinum metallic powder as we can by working moon rocks and nickel. we bring that to our temporary machine area, where we just added the first few steps of the plat line. And as soon as we get some output, we can start mixing some of the titanium platinum vanadium alloy. Cooking that stuff in our old EBF is going to take some time, so we give it a help by adding a new EBF to our new base. And while we wait, we shall also add some more machines to our new base. And an automated farm. But there is one last thing we should do before completing our new EBF, since that thing is going to eat quite some power. We should also improve our power generation in a proper way. Which means a vacuum nuclear reactor. Such setup requires some automation to manage its coolant, but it makes quite some power. And with that, we are now ready to complete our new EBF. This one is finally capable of cooking tungsten steel, meaning we can finally mount our jetpack on our armor. And we also have the niobium titanium required for fluid crafting. And now it is time to automate everything we can automate. And with that, we can now easily do most of the stuff we could need. To have our crafting help always with us, we shall feed some water to a matter condenser until it makes a singularity, which we then use to craft a wireless terminal. We can equip it as a ring, so that it doesn't take space in our pockets. And to forget about its charge, we shall have a wireless charger in our base. However, while that looks cool, we have an issue with its power consumption. We could use many small antennas, but that's annoying to manage. Also, the wireless won't charge our armor yet. And with that, we are now ready to start building some more stuff. For the moment, we will use cable diodes with battery buffers to manage the long distance cabling. The batteries will slowly charge up and then buffer all the power surges. And we keep all the spaghetti cables hidden underneath the buildings. Since our base is going to need a lot of raw materials, the first passive building shall be an ore facility. For now, we shall use storage buses to filter the way we want to process each ore to get the best out of its byproducts. The so-sorted materials will then be worked by arrays of low-tier machines, to keep the power usage low. The second passive building shall be to work oil. For now, we shall use the heavy oil that comes out of oil sands. To work that, we first distill it into its four main components, which will come contaminated by sulfur residues. So, the next step is to take that out by using hydrogen. The byproduct hydrogen sulfide is then turned into sulfuric acid by the same chemical reactor. Once the sulfur is taken out, we stock up some of the clean fuels, and, once our tanks are filled, we crack the rest so that we can distill out some more processed gases that we can use for fabricating various kinds of plastics. All those gases are stored in this column of tanks, and, once they are filled, the rest will be sent to a turbine for making power. In the same building, we shall also make some of the aforementioned plastics and rubbers. Other than the two synthetic rubbers, we also make polyphenylene, required to cover higher tier of cables. We bring those polymers to a cluster of assemblers, so that we can throw in any wire to get it properly insulated. Also, by using heavy oil we are making a lot of toluene, useful for making explosives. Moving on, before automating some EBFs, we want to have a better power production. We are now using a more resilient layout in our vacuum setup. Those vents will fix heat leakages during cell swaps. We extract nearly exhausted coolant cells before they get destroyed with 3 checks and ignoring the NBT data. Also, we have a compressed chest for cells that need to be restored and a diamond one for fresh new ones. And we should probably have more cells in that loop. And with that we can finally do some more progress. Our next objective is to make epoxy, but, from now on, we shall always automate everything we do. And we managed to make epoxy by adding just 3 more LCRs to our base. Its usage is for the advanced circuit boards, which we shall make an adapted pattern for our dedicated LCR which contains the etching fluids. The next quest asks for nano CPUs, and we quickly add those patterns to our system too. Those are required for the nano processors, so we also make patterns for those. And, to better balance the crafting speeds, we shall have 2 circuit assemblers and alternate the circuit steps between the 2 assemblers. And now we can enjoy watching AE2 craft our first leaf circuit. However, for the next task, 1 won't be enough. We need 7 more. With all these circuits we make 2 EV field emitters, required for the control computer of the next tier of rocket. To get some help for the other required parts we shall make a pattern. Then we recursively keep saving in the bookmarks the missing parts and add patterns for those. This may look excessive, but we are going to need those same parts with more recursive steps for the future rockets, so better automate all of that right away. We do that until we are left with just the missing raw materials. Now, since what we miss is not found in a vein and we now have a lot of mineral processing machines, we should probably start using some kind of automated mining. We set up 4 HV miners on the moon to gather the meteorites. Mining a whole vein takes quite some time, but since meteorites are all on the surface and we have 4 miners, we quickly gathered enough dusts for our task. And now we just have to wait for AE2 to complete all the parts of our rocket, which we will have to manually assemble. And with that, we can now go to Mars. There we will find new ores such as uranium, tungsten, and better tungsten. We quickly set up a couple of miners to gather some tungsten, which is the main material for the next tier. And then we run away as fast as we can since it is almost night and we do not have a thermal protection for the cold Mars nights. Can use that time to craft a thermal padding to be more prepared for the next Mars trip, where we will retrieve our tungsten. But I think that's a story for the next episode. Bye bye.